Hi, everybody. Sorry, technical difficulties on my end. I'm really happy to be here. I think I'm going to let the panelists introduce themselves, so I'm not going to belabor it by doing a short little intro. So just so you know, we're in a session called Movement Building in STEM in the midst of the Black Lives Matter movement. We have Dr. Brian Nord, Erin McGee, and Jasmine Sadler here. And you all should be seeing a Slido on poll and Q&A on your end. But if you aren't, you can, just take a picture of the QR code or go to sli.do and type in this code. So I'm gonna stop talking and I'll let Brian take over.
Hi, thanks, Jess. So I'm Brian Nord. I'm a scientist at Fermilab, and I also work at the University of Chicago. My daily work is in artificial intelligence and astrophysics. Jessica, would you like me to answer the prompt that has the anecdote related to this, or just say who I am? The prompt? Okay. So the prompt is sort of like, what experience do we think is important in terms of being a change agent or in terms of movement building? And I think the systems that we're a part of and up against are at best recalcitrant and at worst oppositional. But in all cases, what I've seen is that what I've witnessed is that they prioritize self-preservation, which means they don't prioritize transparency, and that secrecy is among their primary operating principles. So as someone who tries to change systems, I think it would be foolish of me to not appreciate that. So instead of like an anecdote that like says what I've been doing recently, I want to demonstrate that awareness and not say a specific strategy, but I want to reflect on what it means to try to change a thing. So what does change look like? Briefly, I think one of the biggest points of failure that I've seen is a pattern of behavior, a deep pattern of behavior in institutions where they lack the skills and experience, I mean the people in power, to imagine what it looks like for us to exist in a just environment. So I think people have a failure of imagination. They can imagine what it looks like to build a telescope or new instrument, but not necessarily to think about what it looks like for us to all be equal and be treated justly. And so I think that is both a problem, obviously, but it also is an opportunity for those of us who are willing to engage our imaginations. So even though they don't know what a just future looks like, let alone a just now, I think this tells us where we should be aiming a lot of our effort. Thanks.
Yes, thank you for that. Erin, you want to go next?
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Erin McGee. I am a PhD candidate at the University of Arizona studying lizards and their diets. I'm also interested in barriers that prevent Black women from entering and remaining in natural resources fields. Many of you might know me from Twitter and Instagram. I go by Afro_Herper, where I run a pretty popular social media game called #FindThatLizard, where I post a picture of a lizard camouflaged in its natural environment, and you all have to find it. So what Brian said kind of like hit home for me as far as, not being able to have the imagination to see a just present or future. But something that I've realized in the last couple of years, I actually took a class on organizational culture, is that the way that a lot of us, especially those of us who are trying to make change, but our backgrounds aren't necessarily in change making, as in we don't necessarily have the academic literature background where, I'm here as a herpetologist, but I want to make change. And taking that class and understanding how organizations function and run and why so many are so resistant to change has been incredibly helpful for me, where it's just like, back to the imagination thing that Brian said, we want to see change, and how do we imagine what change is? And can we imagine that change being totally tearing down systems and rebuilding them into something that actually works for everyone, instead of just, changing bits and pieces here and there, trying to patchwork something to keep it into existence, even though we know it's not going to work like that.
Hello, my name is Jasmine Sadler. I'm a ballerina, but I'm also an aerospace engineer. So my background is in aerospace engineering and math as a math minor. And now I work for myself in STEAM education, but I spent 10 years as a corporate engineer in mechanical and aerospace fields. Mostly in turning air into energy. So a design engineer, test engineer, and quality engineer and manager before quitting, like most women do. Before the 20 or 30 year mark, most women are out of engineering. And so I am a statistic in that sense. And so I am out now, and along the lines of what Brian and Erin mentioned, it's because the systems of oppression that are in place already before I even got there. And then, yeah, just found myself at work fighting this battle or being a recruiter or putting on a Black History Month event on behalf of the company when I'm an engineer. I'm just supposed to be engineering just like everybody else gets to come to work and be an engineer. I'm just supposed to be doing that kind of stuff too, but I'm also putting on recruitment activities, retention activities, Black History Month events, fighting for more women to be in the space, fighting for more Black engineers to be even considered as candidates for the job. And I didn't specialize in any of that. I didn't go to school for any of that stuff. And actually, while I was working as an engineer, I started my company called the STEAM Collaborative, where I work with informal education spaces to design and implement STEAM programs for them. So like museums and after school programs. I went back to school and got my MBA to learn more about business. And now I'm a doctoral candidate in education and focusing in educational leadership with my dissertation planning to be in the benefits and detriments of a monocultural university. So some of the systems that are in place around big public institutions or even nonprofit universities, and how those systems are contributing or being part of the oppression of Black women pursuing STEM careers.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, already nuggets of knowledge being dropped here. So I'm gonna lead into the first question that I have, and unfortunately my polls aren't working. So there'll be times where I'm going to poll the audience, but just answer in the Q&A. And also please start dropping in any specific questions that you may have for our panelists. But I'm gonna start us off. So my question is, how important is it to have a values aligned collective for building social movements? And on top of that, are there any strategic reasonings for working as a collective?
What order would you like us to go in, Jess?
Any order, just jump in.
Well, I'll say, over this past summer when we were going through a lot of, things going on with police brutality and Christian Cooper and Ahmaud Arbery and that type of thing, a group of, fellow Black outdoor enthusiasts, professionals, whatever, we were kind of talking. And we were just like, well, we don't understand why no one's saying anything about this. Like, clearly, things are happening to Black people in the outdoors. We're Black people who work in the outdoors, but we don't see our colleagues saying anything. And so we decided that we wanted to call them out, our non-Black, our white colleagues, we wanted to call them out. And also, we wanted to uplift and celebrate each other as Black outdoors people. And so we created, the hashtag Black Birders Week. And from there, we kind of birthed the Black AF and STEM collective of, all these super amazing people who are, recreating or working in the outdoors and also having to be super cognizant of our Blackness, and being able to be within such a group and have that solidarity with one another was a pretty amazing thing to be a part of. And it was, you know, almost a relief to know that I wasn't alone. It wasn't just me experiencing or thinking these things, and then having everybody come together to create such an impactful event. You know, there's power in numbers, and I think we definitely showed that this summer.
Well, that's great. I can share. Yeah, strategic reasons, working as a collective. I'm all about collaboration. My company is called the STEAM Collaborative, and that was spawned out of what I do naturally as a people person, social butterfly, just meeting different people, but also understanding their strengths and their passions and learning about the person, and then finding a way that I can actually connect them with someone else, or that I can work with them. But all of that comes down to, you know, the values, the strategy, all of those things, and just knowing a person as a person and respecting who they are and their experiences, things that they've gone through in life. And I mean, even my journey in education has been, I guess, different. Started off at a Black-owned private school when I was really little, where we did cultural activities every week. We sang the Negro National Anthem every Friday, you know, different things like that. But then going to the public schools, and then finding out in the public schools, I was actually ahead of their learning curriculum. So then I was put in the talented and gifted programs, then honors classes, AP classes. Got a 5 on AP Calc exam, placed me out of Calc 1, going to University of Michigan, all those things, studied abroad in Hong Kong, lots of different life experiences that make me a diverse person, not just the color of my skin, making me the diverse person. And so understanding people for who they are and their lived experiences, and then being able to put those together. And so that's where I've had the largest impact with these different STEAM leaders working together, is because I started off just doing math tutoring. So one-on-one sessions with the student to help them love math. But then once I started working with adult program leaders and organizations and executive directors of these larger youth programs, now with me putting them together, working as a collective in that way, we have much larger impact than me working one-on-one with a child to help that one child love math more. Now I have several hundreds of children that get to love math more because I've worked as a collective.
I think there can be a lot of value in working individually. That kind of gives you flexibility and independence so that you can be nimble in whatever your environment is. But when you're working, if you're working as a collective, and I'm thinking of as a collective is sort of the strict sense in which I think of a collective is a group that has no leadership, that's hierarchical, and no like spokesperson. So everyone speaks as one group or speaks with one voice. And in that definition, that united voice is much harder for an institution or another individual to penetrate and vilify or destabilize if the group has trust, of course. So I think part of the power in working as a collective comes through having that layer of clarity for the group, and also the people who are outside who you may be working in opposition to. It's harder for them to understand what's going on the inside and then mess with you. So strategically, I think that brings a lot of power. Also, when you're on the inside, I think, you know, it's essential that these groups have trust. Otherwise, they're not really going to work out. Like from the jump, that has to be a commitment to trust. And when you have that, there can also be an opportunity for people to support each other through the emotional and psychological challenges, because those are like, if we're all talking about the same thing here, fighting white supremacy and patriarchy, we're living in a gaslight in this community, and having people that you can lean on and talk to about that, it's hard to like to understate the value of that, I think.
Yeah, thank you, all of y'all, for sharing. why you think a collective is important. And I agree with a lot of what was said. 2020 was a tough year for Black folks, and specifically, and everybody in general. And if it weren't for the many collectives that I'm a part of that have the same types of values that I have, that are fighting the same fight, it would have been worse. So yes, thank you all for sharing. I started a new poll on Slido. Let me know if you're able to see it. But essentially, if you can't, I'm wanting to engage with the audience and ask, who is your collective? And feel free to drop that in the Q&A, or if you can see the poll, drop it in the poll. But yeah, I want to know, who is your collective? Who are you going to organize to gain social power in creating a movement, a social movement at your respective institutions? And while y'all answer that, let me go ahead and hit the panelists with another question. This one is difficult. I think they're all difficult, but yeah. How do you approach having difficult conversations around systemic oppression, white supremacy, misogynoir, with individuals in traditional positions of power who may have, and probably do, have blind spots in this space?
I think that a lot of people right now are unwilling to have difficult conversations. People are maybe more willing than they were just a few months ago, but I think there's still a resistance, especially in academic environments, because people, I've witnessed, I think, that people are not willing to get into that discomfort a lot. But I think that it doesn't do anyone a service to not have those conversations. And so people talk about like wanting to be compassionate and nice to each other. And I think that the most compassionate thing to do is actually to be honest. Myself personally, I really have to assess what someone's perspective is first before I think about whether I'm willing to engage. So if someone is like not really sure that white supremacy is a problem, then I'm probably not going to spend a lot of time trying to convince them. I think that maybe there's an answer to one of the questions that was there about what can non-Black allies do related to that. But if I think that someone is willing to grow, then I'm willing to spend a lot more time with them. And when it comes to misogynoir, I think that this is like, if there wasn't a time before, I mean, there always was, but now is the time, especially for Black men, I think, to consider how we contribute to that, and how we, I mean, including myself, how we historically and presently oppress Black women, Black trans people, Black queer folk. It's pretty rampant. I think the conversation, unfortunately, the open conversation is still a new thing. I personally try to talk to my fellow Black men about it. And then, like, I think here and other places, I think we just need to say that this is a conversation that we need to have, and it needs to like happen just much more openly. So I'm a bit ashamed that I don't have that we aren't having a forum or anything on it right now. But I think that that's I think that that's now is the time.
I can talk. Yeah, so for me, it's been interesting now that I've been out of the corporate life for about a year and some change now, especially during the pandemic. Like, I went full time with my business in November 2019. I've really spent the last year just unlearning a lot of the things that I experienced while I was at work. And so even the clients that I have now, where they're like, yeah, just put together what you plan to do for us, to roll out this STEAM program for the students. And I'm like trying to put together a whole slide deck and like pages of a proposal and all of that. And they're like, well, we just want like a paragraph. Like, that's really all we're asking for. We're just going to slip your paragraph into the description of what we're doing. That's it. And I'm like, really? That's all you want? And so that's been a really eye-opening, well, one of the things that, has opened my eyes to a lot of the trauma that I dealt with while in the corporate workspace in STEM. Just the continual need to prove myself, to when I go in for performance appraisals, to have like a spreadsheet of everything I did, the date I did it, the point of contact of everything that I did. just to get a little 2% raise, things like that. That's been really interesting. And so now that I've been out of that for a year, still healing from it, the question is like, how do we approach people that are in this space about, systemic oppression? And at this point, it's been from a more mentally free standpoint that I approach them how I guess I've always wanted to be approached in this space, which is as an equal. And so even recently, Dr. Arlene, who's one of the then ambassadors with us, we were on a University of Michigan put together a Martin Luther King Day panel. And so, just even talking with her through some of the thoughts, but there were 8 Black aerospace engineer alums on one panel. And there's only been like 30 of us in the past over 100 years that the program's been in existence. And one of the professors from the university was in the planning sessions with us and, talking through some ideas. And, I had to talk to him, like a lot of people were talking about, saying professor this and I, he introduced himself on a first name basis. So I addressed him on a first name basis and said, I'm so proud of you for even being in this space with us because, no other professor is even here. And like, you are our main connection to the aerospace engineering department. And so I'm proud of you. And he's like, thanks, I just don't really know what I'm doing. I'm just kind of here. And I'm like, but you don't understand how big of a deal it is for you to even just be in this meeting with us and for you to finally be the minority in a space, like just how kind of uncomfortable you're feeling around all these Black women. Like that's what we feel every day of our lives. So, proud of you for that. And then, if you're going to talk to the other professors and encourage diversity to them, we're here to support you because we have to be our own advocate every day. And so, if you just need some talking points, some stats, like whatever you need us to hop into one of your Zoom sessions with the professors, we're here to support you. And so being able to talk to somebody like that who is in power, but, also understanding he's not in power over me. At that point, you wanted me to be on your panel, those kinds of things. And so, it's a partnership, it's this collaboration kind of space. And I have to be comfortable and strong enough in my own strength to speak to him as my equal, because that's how I want him to view me.
For me, this question is kind of difficult because I'm very conflicted about the concept of talking to people about diversity, equity, inclusion, all that, because most of the time it's a waste of breath. For about a year, I sat on the chair as a chair for my department's Committee on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And at every turn, there was just so many barriers that I faced of people being like, oh yeah, they did something that they probably shouldn't have done, but let's give them the benefit of the doubt. Or, well, we don't want to, harshly punish people too much. Or, well, they have tenure, so it's not really anything that we can do. And, every excuse. And honestly, I'm tired of it. And I really, really don't talk to people about, diversity and stuff, like having a conversation. If it's a thing where I'm giving like a presentation, maybe I'm talking on social media and that type of thing, sure. But having a conversation about it, not really. If I have to have a conversation with you about it, that means that you need to go do some more work, because all you're asking for me to do is try to make you feel better about, wherever it is that you're lacking. You're looking for some kind of validation from me, or you're just trying to argue. And so there's very little conversation that needs to be happening, because we all know that, diversity, equity, inclusion, there's issues in every profession, personal, like every space in our society, there's issues with that. And so if you are having a hard time with that kind of information being given to you, if I have to really like have a hard conversation with you, I don't need to. That's the whole thing. I don't need to. You need to be going out and doing your own research, because all it's going to do is give me a headache, and then you're going to go back about your business doing the same things you were doing anyway. So yeah, I really just don't do that anymore.
Did everybody, I think everybody answered this question, right? Erin, speaking truth to power right now. That was amazing. And actually, I dropped a new poll question and also dropped it in the Q&A. So feel free to answer it. And it's essentially asking, what are you doing outside of this E&I complex to dismantle oppressive structure? So I encourage the audience to answer that question. And I think I'm just going to add a little spin to this idea of complicated, topics, complicated discussions. I'm Afro-Latinx. My mom is a Mexicana. My biological father was Black. And it was at a really young age that I realized that the way I moved through society wasn't the same as the way my mom moved through society or the way my sister moved through society. Like, I recognized at a very young age that my skin was darker than the rest of my family. And I remember having the conversation with my mom, I was maybe 10, 12 years old, of somebody at the store following me around and just not leaving me alone. And I remember like telling my mom that and recognizing that it was because I looked different than everybody else around, and her not understanding it and trying to like swat it away and saying that it was because I was young and saying it because I wasn't, close to my mom. But like, we as Black people understand that feeling, like we get that. And it was a complicated conversation that I wasn't ready to have at that age. Like, I didn't understand. And there were many of these instances where I recognized that I was being treated differently than the rest of my family. But then essentially I was being gaslit by them as well, because they didn't understand, they didn't recognize this difference. And as I got older, I had those complicated conversations. I addressed these issues of race, gender, and sexuality, and how, colorism comes into play, and, Black people are treated differently. And it was hard, but there was trust within that relationship, and there was love, between my mom and I, and that allowed us to sit in that uncomfortability and sit in that conflict and come over to the other side. So yeah, I agree. For the most part, if people are coming to me and wanting me to educate them on what white supremacy is, like, Google, right? But there are instances where I feel that I have love for the person and they love me, and there's trust that I'm okay with sitting and having that complicated conversation. Yeah. So anyways, just
can I add to that a little bit too?
Yeah, of course.
I was thinking about adding on to what Erin was saying of just like not wanting to have those conversations. And I think for me, it comes from a place of like, in order for you to start to empathize on what I'm saying, I need to talk about experiences that I've had and how I felt oppressed in those and all of that. And that makes me have to relive that trauma. So I have to go back to that place, and I have a photographic memory. So I literally like go back to the place. I go back to my boss's office when I came out with this, and then he went to his computer and we're doing the performance appraisal, and he's literally deleting off all of my diversity and inclusion efforts because he's like, this is not relevant to your job as an engineer. And when I put that I have a 4.0 and I got student of the year in my MBA program, that is not relevant to how you do your job as an engineer. And when we brought 100 students, high school and college students, to our job site to experience what it's like to shadow an engineer, that is not relevant to your job as what you do as a quality engineer, and like literally deleting it off on his computer. So again, I don't necessarily need to go back to that space all the time, but like for people to kind of even understand what that is and what that could feel like for them, I have to go back there. And so sometimes I'm not emotionally strong enough at that point to go back there with them, for them. And then it gets into this place of like, misogynoir, just like being exploited almost, of like, people are like, wow, tell me more about how terrible it is to be you, those kinds of things. And it's not fun. And I don't have to do it, and like you said, Jessica, for the people that I love, for the people that I care about, sometimes, even if I don't feel like it, I might go back there. But, it gets into a space where it's like, I'm not just, here for your entertainment, especially my pain should not be entertaining to you, those kinds of things. But again, sometimes I can go back there, and sometimes it helps me heal, and it helps me heal others who are going through it when I go back. So it's like, but again, people just get to go to work and be an engineer every day and get promoted. And go, the next thing. And I have to like really worry about like what's happening, and going back to traumatic experiences.
And before we move on, Jasmine, I think it's really interesting because, and not interesting and interesting, but interesting in the way, Black folks be saying interesting, that your boss and your higher ups ask you to do all this diversity and whatnot work. And as soon as it comes time for a promotion, oh, that doesn't have anything to do with your job. And it's not just in engineering, it's in, academia too, where people are looking to go up for tenure and that type of thing, and doing diversity work and working with their community is not included in tenure packages. It's not looked onto with, high esteem and that type of thing. So you have this whole, well, we want to be more diverse and we want to be more inclusive, but the work you do is not valuable enough to us to give you a promotion. So which one is it? Do you just want to look like you're doing the right thing, or do you want to do the right thing? And most of y'all just want to look like you're doing the right thing. And so why would I bother to have a conversation with you about it when all that matters to you is theater, appearances?
Yeah, folks want us to be Black, but they don't want us to be Black, the danger of, one of the dangers of engaging in these conversations, like even a little bit, like at work, and not even educating, but engaging in a conversation, is like that stuff gets co-opted in a minute. And that's, I think, what part of what y'all are talking about. And when you do more and more, they just co-opt and co-opt and co-opt. And I haven't yet witnessed like a situation where that doesn't happen to some extent, unfortunately.
Yeah, that statement that you made, they want us to be Black. And so it came to a point for me, I realized, like, you want my number, like you want your count of Black employees to go up, and you want your count of women here to go up, but you don't really want all of the experiences that come with me being Black or me being a woman. And so, sometimes that's like crying, sometimes that's like getting angry, sometimes, so it comes with the different things of like just being emotional, which is a strength, not a weakness, those kinds of things. When you're talking about, firing somebody who I know personally, that works on the floor, the manufacturing floor, and has 5 kids, and this is where he's been for 20 years and all of that, and you feel nothing with the fact that you have to do that, like, but you also don't know this person for who they are. You've never met their kids, all of those kinds of things. And like, that's a strength that women have. It's not a weakness to be emotional. So things like that.
Okay, so we have 2 questions from the audience that I want us to answer. I think we're getting close to time, but I don't actually know. So we're just going to keep going until somebody from AAAS tells us to shut it down. So the first question, and I think we've touched upon it a little bit, but what are good ways for non-Black allies in STEM and STEM adjacent fields to be actually helpful in movement building? And I think we definitely touched on the bad ways, but let's see if we can touch on what can they actually do.
I have lots of ideas. Don't talk to Black people about whatever, like, you feeling bad about yourself. Don't do that. We don't want to take on your trauma on top of our own trauma. Hire Black people, put Black people in positions of power, don't talk to them about anything that they're doing. Just let them do what they're doing. Let the Black folks do what you hired them to do, and be open. And going back to what we talked about at the very beginning of this, be open, open up your imagination and get ready for some change, even if that change means that your organization is destroyed. If you're, say, like we're talking about the University of Arizona, and the University of Arizona is built on white supremacist beliefs, and which most institutions in the US are, because that's how the US was created. But in order to get rid of it, that means to totally dismantle the University of Arizona as it is currently, presently. That is what has to happen for most of your institutions. And the greatest thing that you can possibly do is to open your imagination and to thinking about what that could possibly look like and all the good it can bring, not only for us, but for you too. Like, how does white supremacy also hold white people and non-Black people of color? Like, we're seeing it in our country right now. Look at what's going on with the pandemic because of Donald Trump. I mean, look at what's going on when it comes to people who are in lower wage positions. And then there are, poor middle-class white people out there who are, suffering under white supremacy, but not quite realizing that. So you have to be, the biggest thing that you could just do is open up your imagination to what a world without white supremacy looks like.
There's no more time for band-aids, basically. So we need people to stop proposing small things that are not a part of larger things. Right now, we need radical change because y'all have waited 400 years to do something for real. And so the problem is not little things that need to change. The problem is the system. The problem is the policies in the system. And if those things don't change, then the band-aids are not interesting or not useful. So we need people, this is a little bit still the bad way, but it's changing a bad behavior. We need people to stop saying change takes time. We're not working on your clock. You do not get to decide the time of our liberation. So as Erin said, you need to get out of our way, and you need to be ready for your system to change fundamentally. And when we say that doesn't work because that hasn't worked for hundreds of years, you need to listen.
Just popping in with something real quick. In that committee that I told you guys that I was the chair of, I was talking to the head of my department, so the big man, and we were talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion stuff, and I was like, well, change needs to go ahead and happen. And he was like, well, you could wait, well, it's going to take about 10 years. And I was like, sir, I'm Black every day. And he didn't have nothing else to say, but we still waited. No, what has really changed in the 2 years since we've had that conversation? If you're going to put a timestamp on it, be moving with the speed to reach that timestamp, but nobody's doing it. They just threw out a number. That 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, that number really didn't matter. It just meant that what it said was we are not currently ready to make that kind of change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. All of the things that was said of like, yeah, time isn't real. Like, the fact that I've worked in informal education for so long because it's difficult for me to get into the public education system and curriculum and things like that for change, especially promoting STEAM, that I've had to work in the informal education space through museums, after school programs, science centers, things like that. But now, because of the pandemic, everything literally switched to virtual. Everything switched online. Everything switched to informal education. All of the things that people said were impossible for children to learn online. Literally, like some schools, I live in San Diego, some schools out here switched that weekend. Schools shut down that Friday, they were online that Monday. But these were things that were impossible. Things can happen overnight, and especially with all the scientists that are watching right now, You know, we know a lot of solutions. You know, the vaccine came out in months, you know, things like that. And it's like, if you can come out with a life-saving vaccine, like Erin said, I'm Black every day. What's a vaccine that you can do for this pandemic? And so one thing I saw, one of the questions was, you know, what's something that you've seen that's successful? And I'm here to represent, you know, we're STEMThis ambassadors. It's 125 women in science around the country. That's one successful thing that's going on. There's a philanthropic effort centered around women scientists that, you know, is a huge effort that gave us grants to do all the great stuff that we're already doing. That's been a successful implementation, successful change. And you know, all of us were super proud when we all got together before the pandemic, and out of 125, there's like 25 Black women that are part of it, which didn't have to be the case. It didn't have to be the case at all. You know, a lot of us are used to being the only Black woman at a thing like that. You know, a lot of us are used to maybe seeing one other Black woman at a thing like that, but there's 25 other Black women at something like that. And, you know, same for Latinx, same for disabled, same for, you know, all of the things that need representation. And so that little girls can be inspired, but also so little Black girls and Black boys can be inspired, because there's 25 of us, and I'm going to visit my statue in the airport at the end of the month. Like, there's statues of all of us. So that's one thing that, I mean, especially a lot of these rich STEM organizations and universities can do. You can create an STEM ambassador program.
Yes, amazing. And I just want to underscore what Jasmine said, that we are able to create a life-saving vaccine for this pandemic. Mental health has come to the forefront because we're working from home, you know, in conversations at work. So it really just underscores what we as a society value and what we don't. Because if we value something, we attack it with rigor. We throw money at it. We try and figure out how to, you know, save and create a life-saving vaccine. But Black people are told to wait. Just kind of sit in that. Black people are told to wait. 400 years have passed, and yet they're still telling us to wait. So any final words from the panelists? I do have one more question, and if you can maybe wrap that into your final words, that'd be cool. Examples of positive change you've seen, and Jasmine started us off perfectly with the STEMThis ambassadorship.
I'll go. So yes, definitely seconding the STEMThis ambassadorship. It's been such an amazing experience for me. Something else that I've been doing is I've been working with the Doris Duke Conservation Scholars Program through the University of Florida, where it was previously housed. And I get to take out 2 undergraduate students with me when I do field research, and it's aimed at diversifying the profession of conservation. So the people who are doing conservation work, and it's really trying to, you know, get in Black, Brown, LGBTQ, like just make it more as diverse as possible to make that field. And so something that group does is they have trainings at the National Conservation Training Center. And we talk about, like, you know, different marginalizations, and that's somewhere where we have some hard conversations about what it means to be Black in America, what it means to not be cis heterosexual in America, what it means to, you know, be marginalized in America. And so that's one of those places where I have those conversations, because those kids are normally amazing, and it's worth having those conversations with them. But the fact that we have those conversations in that kind of a program, where in most biology, conservation, ecology programs, those conversations are not being had, despite those being the realities. Like, we're talking about, like, when, like, I'm taking, like, my Mexican American students down to the border to do field research, what kind of experiences might they have that's different from a non-Mexican American person? Like, your identity does you know, impact your life experiences, and people who are also in your profession who say they want to be allies and to support you need to understand that. And then to just finally kind of wrap it up, I would just say that if you really want to, you know, have some change, hire some Black women, pay them what they deserve, plus tax, and let them do what you want them to do. Do not stand in their way.
I think the things that encourage me the most are people engaging with activists who have decades of experience, at least communities that do, and both in terms of scholarship, reading the books, reading Davis, reading Giovanni, as well as modern groups, Black Lives Matter, and other local groups that have been doing the work. So stepping outside comfort zones of academia, where usually the tools have not really worked, and learning some other tools that are from other places. I've seen mostly this happen amongst early career scientists. It would be great to see people who are not grad students and postdocs engage in that, because those are the tools and tactics that are actually going to bring change, I think.
And then for me, some closing words, like something you can do to help is be an advocate, use your privilege, understand what privilege is. If you don't, use your privilege to be an advocate and a champion for a Black woman or a Black man in your workspace. Speak life into them, encourage them, but also take them along the journey, because we need extra credit, like, you know, we need extra support, you know, along the way, to counteract the things that have been done systemically. And so, I mean, for me, you know, also don't be afraid to start your own thing too. Like, it doesn't have to always be at work through what work funding on work hours. Like, you know, entrepreneurship, and I'm all for it, and it gives you that ability to do what you want to because it's your own company. And so you can literally make a part of your company focused on diversity efforts, and not just for show, but literally because you know we need it. And so, yeah, I mean, that's exactly what I'm doing. That's why I got out of the corporate space. That's why I started the STEAM Collaborative. And ultimately my goal is to own and run a STEAM university. So that's why I'm going back for my doctorate in educational leadership, you know, things like that, that I'm understanding a lot of, and this is all we're talking about in class, a lot of the systemic issues that have happened, but then also what Erin talked about, and having like this transdisciplinary learning, where it's not just an interdisciplinary, where we're talking about STEM and arts, but we're also talking about you as a person, your culture, your beliefs. In my classes, we meditate and, you know, really just come together in that way. So those are all things that are important to the identity of someone. When we're trying to tell a little Black girl, yes, you can be a rocket scientist too, it's changing her identity because she may have never even seen that for herself.
Jessica, before you close us out, I have one last thing, I promise.
Go ahead.
Genius is not rare. I repeat, genius is not rare. So fire those people who are preventing you from removing white supremacy from your institution.
Great last words. And with that, we are finished with this panel. Thank you so much to Jasmine, Erin, and Brian for just speaking truth to power, and doing the work. Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Jess.